From dangerous work to pollution, Europe is setting a plan in motion not just to cut greenhouse gas emissions at home, but to stop them being sourced elsewhere too.
It's going to be bloody hard.
And despite laws meant to protect the most vulnerable in India, some people are still being pushed into life-threatening work, coming up the ancient system that continues to separate people by class and put lives in danger.
Any society in the world you think about, there's someone at the top and someone at the bottom.
Caste has shaped lives for generations. We examine how this system of segregation now collides with the climate crisis.
We have the documented reports like how many sanitation workers are dying, but there is no political will.
Just 2 degrees is on. Now,
what exactly are the circumstances for sewage workers? Are they forced to do this?
Caste is in the society in every space.
In some parts of the world, the sport of cricket is loved and cherished. In India, it would be fair to say it's an obsession, adored by hundreds of millions. But before a ball is even bowled, someone has to stitch it by hand. That takes long hours for little pay. A lot of that work is done by Dalits, Indian communities historically pushed into jobs others consider unclean. So even as the entire nation celebrates the game of cricket, the hands that make it possible are still looked down and frowned upon.
And that raises a centuries-old question. How much of your life is decided before you're even born? In India, a person's last name can still influence the work they're expected to do, where they're allowed to live, and how they're treated in a crisis. And for some communities, that means being forced into one of the most dangerous jobs imaginable, cleaning human waste. So what exactly is the caste system, and why does it matter in a warming world?
When people hear the word caste, they often think of a centuries-old tradition that modern India has left behind. But caste is a living social system, a hierarchy, that shaped where people sit in society from birth, who has status, power, and who's pushed to the margins. For example, the 2023 film Reagan shows how hierarchies shape lives far beyond India, even in the US today.
Any society in the world you think about, there's someone at the top and someone at the bottom.
Caste is a system of dividing hereditary classes of society into different social groups, traditionally tied to ideas of purity or pollution. Certain groups are seen as higher and others as lower or impure. In practice, caste has often dictated what work a person is expected to do, who they can marry, where they can live, and how they're treated by institutions, from schools to police to employers. And at the bottom of this system are people historically labelled untouchables, today commonly referred to as Dalits, for whom caste discrimination can be violent and life-changing. Bant Singh is a musician and considered an untouchable. He was savagely attacked after confronting men from a higher caste over the rape of his young daughter.
ਇਹਨੇ ਸਜ਼ਾ ਕਰਾਈ ਹੈ ਮੈਨੂੰ ਰਾਹ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਘੇਰ ਕੇ ਵੀ ਇਹਨੂੰ ਆਪਾਂ ਸ਼ਬਦ ਸਿਖਾ ਦਈਏ ਕੋਈ ਹੋਰ ਨਾ ਮੈਨੂੰ ਪਾਈਪ ਹੈਡ ਪੰਪ ਦੇ ਡੰਡੀਆਂ ਨਾਲ ਤੇ ਟੰਬਿਆਂ ਨਾਲ ਮੇਰੇ ਚਾਰੇ ਅੰਗ ਪੈਰ ਕੁੱਟ ਕੇ ਚੂਰ-ਚੂਰ ਕਰਤੇ.
And survivors of a triple murder in rural Western India say the killings were fueled by discrimination.
आमचेच कारणे एवढं होतो कशामुळं आम्ही या जातीत आहेत म्हणून आमचा काय गुन्हा आहे का मग आम्ही दलित म्हणून.
Caste is most closely associated with South Asia, particularly India, Nepal, and also caste dynamics affecting communities in Sri Lanka, Pakistan, and Bangladesh, often taking different forms, depending on religion, ethnicity, and local history. Even where laws prohibit discrimination, caste can remain deeply enforced through community norms and informal power structures. India's constitution explicitly outlaws untouchability. Article 17 states that untouchability is abolished, forbidden in any form, and its enforcement is an offence punishable by law. On top of that, India has multiple laws aimed at preventing caste discrimination and violence against historically oppressed communities. So the law rejects caste discrimination, but that social reality hasn't caught up everywhere, according to human rights reporting. For generations, certain communities have been pushed into sanitation labour, especially the most stigmatised work involving human waste. Human Rights Watch has documented how manual scavenging, the handling and cleaning of human excreta, has been sustained by caste-based discrimination and coercion. But this goes beyond cleaning toilets. In many places, it extends into hazardous sewer and septic tank work, entering confined spaces where toxic gases can build up, with little equipment and limited protection. India strengthened its national law through the Prohibition of Employment as Manual Scavengers and their Rehabilitation Act 2013. The act prohibits employing people as manual scavengers, the hazardous cleaning of sewers and septic tanks, and mandates rehabilitation for affected workers and families. India's Supreme Court also tied sewer deaths to criminal accountability and compensation frameworks, reinforcing that this work cannot be treated as normal labour. So if the law is clear, why does it still happen? Well, because banning something on paper doesn't automatically remove the poverty trap, the contractor system, the lack of mechanized cleaning, and the social reality that some lives are treated as more disposable than others. There are still reports of sanitation workers dying in septic tanks and sewers, often linked to missing safety gear and hazardous conditions. For example, 2 sanitation workers died in Hansi in Hisar district only last year after they were allegedly forced to clean a hotel's septic tank without safety gear. One worker lost consciousness almost immediately after entering the tank. The other suffocated while trying to rescue him.
हमारे यहाँ पे भेदभाव है, हमसे लोग वहाँ सूचित करते हैं, इसलिए हम प्राइवेट धंधा भी नहीं कर सकते, जिसलिए हमें मजबूरन हमें ये काम करना पड़ता है पेट पालन करने के लिए.
A 2025 academic study published in Science Direct on Dalit communities and climate resilience argues caste is often underestimated in climate planning. While Dalit communities face dual vulnerability from discrimination and from climate risks and disasters. Other research in South Asia similarly finds that marginalized groups, including Dalits, report different and often harsher climate-related impacts and constraints on adapting. And beyond academic journals, Dalit rights and disaster response analyses have documented patterns where discrimination can show up in relief access, recovery support, and whose losses are taken seriously. Raising a simple point, if inequality is built into the social system, it can reappear during emergencies.
Sanitation work in general is dangerous. In India, it can be deadly. According to the country's Press Information Bureau, more than 460 sanitation workers died while cleaning sewer and septic tanks between 2019 and October 2025, despite the practice being outlawed.
So like Indian societal system is like based on this Brahmanical like hierarchy. So there is this kind of like the hierarchical structure called the Brahmins, like who are the upper caste people, and then like all these peoples like Kshatriyas and Shudras and the Dalits. So Dalits are the most like the oppressed and like on the like in the hierarchical triangle. So Dalits are the lowest like community people. So basically this happens because like this so-called like the scriptures, so they somehow like told that like the Dalits like who are at the bottom of the hierarchical structure, so they are only supposed to do these works like the sanitation works, like the human waste works, and like all the dehumanizing like occupations or like or the works.
एक दलित अगर चमार के नाम से चले जाए तो वो जिंदगी भर जूते घिसते रहेगा, चाहे वो कोर्ट में हो चाहे वो बैंक में हो, तो उनको तो बाय बर्थ रजिस्ट्रेशन मिला है.
We want to propagate the idea of having toilets in each and every house. This is very important. Also we have linked problem of cleaning night soil by untouchables. So we want to end both the practices, and therefore we have organized this just to make aware to the people of this country
Is this something the government wants to or can really control?
Yes, the government has lost the laws banning the manual scavenging, but what is actually missing is a political will and the enforcement, not the capacity. So we have like everything. We have the laws, we have the court orders, we have like the Dalit activists are like continuously fighting. We have the documented reports like how many sanitation workers are dying, like under this like the septic tanks, like because of the toxic air. So we have like everything, but there is no political will because of the caste. So no one cares about the deaths of the Dalit workers, and within those Dalit workers, so they are the people who are actually like clean all these like the tanks and die with the poisonous gases. I mean inside the tank without any proper material. The people who call them to do this kind of work, which is actually banned, so they think okay their lives doesn't matter. So even they die, that will be counted as an undocumented stuff.
All here to just protest against the mass killings in the sewer line and septic tank. It is continuously happening in the country, and we have been giving the memorandums and the urges and to the government of India many times. The Prime Minister is completely absent and he is not talking even a single word about that. And whenever we say that and the sanitation, they are talking about the Swachh Bharat, but they are not talking about the mass killings in the sewer line.
David, what are the circumstances for sewage workers? Are they forced to do this?
No one wants to like remove the other person human excretion. No one wants to go inside those deep toxic holes to remove like all the waste like the building has produced. So no one wants to do those those dehumanizing work. Workers enter this toxic and the overheated sewers and the septic tanks with like no real safety, no insurance, and they don't have no health monitoring, and many actually suffer with like chronic illness and death and trauma from repeated accidents. So they are, I mean, I feel they are like, stuck in this kind of economic debt which this capitalistic society and the Brahmanical society back in India creates, which puts it like if you don't go and do that work, you don't earn that like 200 rupees or like the 300 rupees, which may be actually the minimum wage for their whole family like to survive. So they are not freely choosing this work, but there is this like caste discrimination, lack of other jobs. So the main reason for all these things is the caste, because like if there is no caste discrimination, first of all no one can define like who does that work actually. So like I can also do that work, or like some upper caste people are like can also do that work, but like they actually force like Dalits to do this work. So I point out towards the caste discrimination, and obviously they are not in a situation to freely choose this work, but there are a lot of socio economic factors which led them to do this work.
Thanks, David. Well, meanwhile, a study examines how caste, particularly the marginalization of Dalit communities, shapes vulnerability to the climate crisis in India, and argues that government policy often underestimates these social hierarchies. We called up Mehebub Sahana to discuss his submission in the journal Science Direct. Someone told me recently that the caste system no longer exists in India, and the person said it quite aggressively, I might add. How do you respond to something like that?
Yeah, I think the entire Indian system is too much casteist from top to bottom. In administrative, in bureaucrat, in everywhere there is a caste. Suppose if I give you some example. So in a state where I live, it's called West Bengal in India. So the state was run by left government for 35 years. But within the left government, there's a casteism. So when partitions happened in India and Pakistan, an immigrant came from Purva Bangladesh or Purva Pakistan to West Bengal, there is a left government, but till left government resettled the immigrant the upper caste to the city area, the lower caste to the much more vulnerable drought-prone, flood-prone areas. The cleaning system was run by the lower caste people, the Dalit people. So is caste is there. Caste is in planning. Caste is in the society in every space. If you look, all the cleaning or the bureaucratic office or everywhere, then you can find the lower caste people are working in this kind of job. So yes, caste is there.
And out of curiosity, why would someone say today in 2026 that the caste system no longer exists?
So from their title, so it's divided the four caste: the upper caste, the Brahmins, the middle caste, the Kshatriya or Vaishya, and then the Sudra. The Sudra is the lower caste. Sudra, you can find them through their title, name and title. And if you go, suppose if you don't know that their name or title, in a village system or in urban systems, the segregations of settlement is based on caste. The locations of a settlement or the ghettoism is a caste systems. And if you come to any city in India, and you can, or in a village in India, you can see, or when you enter the village or city, and you will go through the class or the types of settlement or quality of settlement, you can, when you will see the low quality settlement or slums, maybe you will find most of these city dwellers or slum dwellers belong to the lower caste.
People live in very crowded conditions with very little space and no infrastructure, lack of access to education, health. So a new generation of unhealthy and currently living people, they're not only unhealthy, they're illiterate, they cannot participate in the economy because they are not skilled. The opportunity cost is very high.
I wonder if the caste system has changed over the decades. I mean, what characteristics of an individual would place them in the lowest caste?
Yeah, so caste vulnerability is in different shape and different way. So it's a social vulnerability, economic vulnerability, and now a climate change. So most of my research on climate change vulnerability, and like if you try to study on different disasters like flood, drought, heat waves, and if you try to map in the city, who are the much more vulnerable? Those who are the frontier worker, those who are walking in the road, in the exposed area, during the heat waves, they are vulnerable. Or who are these workers? They are all belong to the lower caste. Again, if you talk about the flood, who are much more vulnerable to the flood in Indian river area or flood-prone area, or who are living in the flood-prone area, they are all belong. Most of them are belong to the lower caste, near to the river bank, near to the lowland area. So why they are in the lowland area? The question is why? Is it forcefully, or is it economical burden, or is it because lowland area is much more economical? Price is lower. That's why they are there. So these are the hidden question is there. In one of my research article, I have shown that in all the river island, when partitions happen and lower caste people came from eastern Bengal, their resettlement happened in the most of the flood prone area. When disasters came, they become highly flood vulnerable in entire Bengal Delta. Now research going on heat wave based vulnerability. So in all the cities like mega cities, Delhi, Gurgaon, Mumbai, and Bengaluru, all the highly exposed drought and heat wave vulnerable people are the lower caste people.
कुछ नहीं, पीने को पानी नहीं, तो जमीन को कहाँ से, खेती को पानी कहाँ है? बारिश कभी गिरती कभी नहीं गिरती, बारिश के ऊपर है सब, बारिश गिरी तो खेती पीती, नहीं तो खेती पीती नहीं, हमें चम्मल मजदूरी करके खाना पड़ता है.
Farmer suicides in India began much before many of these extreme weather events were striking, right? But what climate change and its vulnerabilities and variabilities have done is to increase the risks in farming And this increasing risks in farming is leading to crop failures, uncertainties, and so on, which is further weakening the economics of cultivation for small and marginal farmers. And that, in that sense, exacerbates the crisis.
I also spoke with someone who couldn't understand the connection between climate vulnerability and Dalits. How do you respond to that?
There's a big debate going on in climate debate. If I say in the IPCC or COP 28, 29, COP 30, that we need to decolonize the sustainability argument and nature-based solutions, and then the indigenous participations in the global debate. So, and they said that it's a decolonization of environmentalism. So in my argument or in my research, I said, okay, we need decolonizations, but also we need decastisms in Indian society. So without decastisms, you can't be decolonize a society which their basic is casteism. In my research, I try to develop a theoretical argument that if we try to understand sustainability and vulnerability in Indian society, then we should redefine we should give priority to the representation of lower caste.
So whether it's dangerous work or pollution, the question is often the same. Who carries the burden and who gets to look clean? For years, Europe cut emissions at home but kept buying carbon-heavy products from elsewhere. Now the EU says it's time to close that loophole by putting a price on imports.
For years, Europe has been trying to cut its carbon pollution. It made companies inside the European Union pay for the carbon they emit, especially in heavy industries like steel, cement and fertilizers.
We chose carbon pricing as a clear guiding and market-based instrument with a social compensation. And the principle is simple. Emission of CO2 must have a price on CO2 that incentivizes consumer, producers and innovators to choose the clean technologies, to go towards the clean and sustainable products.
And on paper it worked. Factories inside Europe became cleaner and emissions across the EU began to fall. But there was a catch.
It's going to be bloody hard.
Europe didn't stop using steel or cement. It just became more expensive to make them inside the EU. So instead of disappearing, a lot of that production was sourced elsewhere. Not always because factories physically moved, but because imports increased. As EU carbon costs went up, carbon-intensive goods from abroad started filling the gap, often from countries with weaker or no carbon pricing at all. That's known as carbon leakage, and it's not just heavy industry that feels it.
Il y a aussi la concurrence déloyale qui aujourd'hui ampute notre revenu à nous agriculteurs français.
This is what that looks like in practice. European steelmakers like ArcelorMittal have warned for years that tougher climate rules inside Europe made it harder to compete with cheaper coal-based steel produced abroad. Steel that could still be sold into the EU without facing the same carbon costs. The result was cleaner production in Europe, but pollution continuing somewhere else.
Ce MACF doit être puissant et efficace. C'est le seul moyen d'appliquer à l'acier importé les mêmes coûts de CO2 que ceux que payent les producteurs européens.
So now the EU is trying to close that loophole. It's called the Carbon Border Adjustment Mechanism, or CBAM. Put simply, it works like this. If you want to sell certain high-polluting products into Europe, you'd have to declare and eventually pay for the carbon used to make them, even if those products were made outside the EU.
There is a lot of enthusiasm in getting this right, and we know from our own experience also in Europe that one of the most effective things we can do is pricing carbon.
CBAM doesn't apply to everything. At least for now, it targets the biggest polluters: steel, aluminium, cement, fertilizers, hydrogen and electricity. Take cement, for example. Companies like Cemex, making it inside the EU, already pay for their carbon emissions, but imported cement often produced using coal historically did not. CBAM changes that. Right now, companies aren't paying yet, they're reporting. Importers now have to say how much carbon went into that steel from India, that fertilizer from North Africa, or that aluminium from Southeast Asia. Even that is a big shift.
On voit enfin l'Europe prendre les premières décisions pour défendre son industrie et son marché intérieur.
For exporters like Tata Steel selling into Europe, this means tracking emissions across complex supply chains. That can be costly and technically challenging. But the system is designed to go further. Soon, importers will need to buy CBAM certificates, priced in line with Europe's own carbon market. If a country already charges for carbon, that cost is deducted. If it does not, the importer pays at the EU border. Supporters say this finally levels the playing field, keeping pollution from being outsourced and pushing cleaner production worldwide. Critics, especially in developing economies, see risks. They argue Europe industrialized first, polluted for decades, and is now setting rules that could make it harder for poorer countries to compete. For smaller exporters, CBAM means higher costs, more paperwork, and monitoring and verification systems many don't have quite yet. So this isn't just about climate and trade policy. It's about competitiveness and whether climate action can be fair as well as effective. For Europe, CBAM is about closing a carbon loophole. But for the rest of the world, it raises a bigger question. Who gets to set the rules and who ends up paying the price for pollution?
And that's our show. Until next time, bye.